start the next session. So this is really like the bonus content of scaling cryptocurrencies via state channels and off-chain solutions. And I really couldn't have done this work without my collaborators, which is Andrew Miller, Ido Bentov, Surya Bakshi, Sarah Mikkeljohn, he's at UCL, Ranjit, can't pronounce his last name, Kumarasan, I think I got that actually, and Christopher Cordy. Okay, so this work's also motivated by the Lightning Network. So the idea is that how do we run things off the blockchain? So what you learn here today is highly applicable to how the Lightning Network would actually work. Cool. So as I mentioned earlier, cryptocurrencies do not scale. Bitcoin can support around 7 transactions per second, and that's roughly 1 megabyte blocks. And Ethereum can support roughly 12 transactions per second. Well, as I mentioned earlier or yesterday, this depends on the complexity of the transaction. So for my e-voting system, which I've linked here, we can do 3 votes every block. So that's 3 transactions every block. We congest the entire network. So these really don't scale. And I sort of alluded to this earlier as well. You know, there's this myth of decentralization, and it's sort of a trade-off between a decentralized set of users and a decentralized set of validators. You know, if we make big blocks and we can support 5,000 transactions per second, we will get a decentralized set of users because we would hope there'd be a low transaction fee. But on the other end, we then get, you know, not everybody can verify the network. Where on the other hand, you know, if you have smaller blocks, everybody can verify the network, but then, you know, not everybody can afford to use the network.
So what's the size of the Ethereum block? What's the maximum size?
So the Ethereum block isn't done by, you know, byte size. It's more to do with, you know, the computation complexity. So the amount of gas. So I think today is like 8 million gas. So a good comparison was like the encrypted vote would cost 2.5 million gas. So that would be 3 votes. Yeah. I always think that's a bit harder to reason about. The Bitcoin one's really simple because you just think of byte size. It's easy for people to actually, yeah.
Do you think that decentralization in that case is maybe not the right word, because would it be better to use a word like accessibility? Because
maybe accessibility.
You can have a product that, I don't know, from PayPal, and it's very cheap and everybody can use it, but it doesn't mean it's decentralized for me. You know what I mean? It means it's accessible. I think it's more between that, the people that can access it and use it.
Maybe, but I mean, in terms of validation, you're not accessing it.
I'm not talking about accessibility, it's more like the large user base.
And let me think about that. Maybe accessibility. In terms of users, accessibility makes more sense. Who can access the network and who can use the network. Yeah. For validators, you're not really accessing the network, are you? You're more storing everything and validating everything.
I'm more talking about that part.
Yeah.
Because I like the opposition between both. Yeah. But I don't think that the side on the left is decentralized.
I guess we could look for a better word. I'll agree with that. I don't mind either. Anyway, the whole point is we want lots of users and we want lots of validators. That's the ultimate goal for scaling. So how can we scale? What you could imagine is that there's a central operator and we just trust him to run the network. And we could have lots of transactions per second. Similar to PayPal, you know, everyone can access the network. But we don't want that. You know, we want to be able to validate everything and we don't want a central operator. So the next question is, could we tweak the consensus protocol? Could we tweak the blockchain protocol and just get 5,000 transactions per second? And that's sort of what EOS is claiming. And you know, you could throw a DAG at it or a hash graph, and you could increase the throughput. But then you get that dilemma. You know, you have more throughput, but not everybody can validate the network. So then you could do sharding. And I think I alluded to this yesterday. Sharding is where we have different shards for different tasks. So we have a shard for hotel bookings and a shard for maybe, you know, train bookings. So I can validate all if I'm only interested in hotels, I just validate the hotel bookings. If I care about trains and hotels, I then have to validate everything. So we distribute the work of validation, but in the worst case, I still have to validate everything as well. So then we have off-chain. And in terms of scalability, what we want to do is simply reduce the amount of transactions that hit the blockchain. What if we could run transactions locally between parties and we just send the final result to the blockchain? That way, the blockchain stores, you know, the final result or what is meaningful, but people run the protocol locally amongst themselves. And there's two ways to do this. One is a side chain, where we have an alternative blockchain. There's someone, maybe there's a central operator, and they're just creating blocks. I use maybe something like Ethereum, I lock my coins here, then I unlock it on the side chain. Then I can start running programs here. Then when I want to go back to Ethereum, I lock the coins here and I put them back into Ethereum. So there's a second blockchain where all the work's being done, and Ethereum's just used to lock and unlock coins. Or there's the idea of a channel. And the channel mostly involves a small group of parties. So it could be 5 people. They all lock coins in to the channel, and then for the channel we could just run poker. I play my hand, you play your hand, and we just run the game between us. When we finish the game, we just send the final result to Ethereum, whoever wins the bet. Then Ethereum will distribute the funds that were locked up. So we're going to look at channels, which is basically just a local consensus protocol between people. And I went to this workshop a few months ago in Berlin. And what I realized is that there's 5 or 6 different groups of people working on payment channels and state channels for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they're all pretty much doing the same thing, but they all have a different definition for what they're doing. They use different terminology, different words, and they're sitting arguing with each other, and you're just talking about the same thing, but different semantics. So this is my definition. So I have a different definition than everyone else. The odd to that troublesome world. And my definition is basically every party will collectively authorize a new state of the application locally amongst themselves. So we lock coins in, and let's just say we play poker. When I play my hand, the new state of the game is that I play my hand, and everyone must agree to that. Once everybody agrees, we can then move on to the next turn in the game. That's the idea of a channel. And if one person doesn't cooperate, the blockchain will guarantee safety. So we're playing poker, someone doesn't agree to the state update, I just go to the blockchain and everybody gets their coins back. And then it's, yep.
The gas that you need to lock into that, is that just for the eventual transactions of the money being split?
I'll go into this in a bit.
Okay.
So basically the gas cost would be to lock it up. And then we could play the game and there's no gas cost.
There's no gas cost.
No gas cost.
Yeah.
So that's what's really promising about the scaling solution.
But that means technically if a few people playing a game and then someone didn't like the result, they could mess it up, so they would start again.
Exactly. Yep. So for a state channel, so for a payment channel where you only deal with payments like Lightning, they only guarantee safety. There's no concept of finishing the game. In a state channel, we also need liveness. So if you don't cooperate, then I can always finish the game on the blockchain. With poker, it doesn't make sense to stop halfway through. We just go on the blockchain, we just finish the game there. So that's what we're going to go for today. Okay? So let's talk about payments, because payments is a really simple example. And this is called a Spielman channel, and it's from 2013. And it's basically just to support a one-way payment channel. So we have Alice and we have Bob. Alice will deposit coins into the channel. Okay, so he deposits her one beautiful coin. Oh, it's just a little brush actually, I never noticed that. Sorry. Anyway, he deposits her one coin anyway. Next, these coins are locked up and they can only be redeemed if one of the following 2 conditions are satisfied. Either Alice and Bob agree and the deposit can be released. That's effectively a payment. Or Alice waits until time T and the coins can be refunded. So there's an expiry time on this channel. Okay? So now what Alice does is the following. Alice creates a Bitcoin transaction that has 2 outputs. Alice will get 0.9 Bitcoin and Bob's going to get 0.1 Bitcoin. So that's the state of the channel, the balance of both parties, and this is effectively Alice paying Bob 0.1 Bitcoin. So he creates this transaction, so he signs it, and he gives it to Bob. Okay? Now Bob needs to make a decision. He can broadcast this transaction immediately, and then he can redeem his 0.1 Bitcoin. And Alice would also get her 0.9 Bitcoin. Or Bob can just wait. Because Bob is guaranteed that Alice can't get the deposit back until the expiry time. So Bob just waits, hoping, Alice will send a second transaction. And Alice does that. Alice creates a second transaction, and she wants to pay Bob another 0.1 Bitcoin. So in the second transaction, Bob's going to get 0.2, and Alice is going to get 0.8. That's the new state of the channel, the balance. She signs it, and she'll give this to Bob. And of course, she keeps doing this. So Alice keeps creating transactions, signing it, giving it to Bob, and eventually Bob has received the entire deposit. He has a transaction where he'll receive the full 1 Bitcoin. Now, because this is a one-way payment channel, there's nothing else Alice can do. So Bob can now sign the final transaction he received that pays him the most coins. He signs it, broadcasts it out to the network, and overall, according to the Bitcoin network, there was 1 deposit from Alice and 1 payment, where Bob got the full 1 coin. But locally, between Alice and Bob, there could have been thousands of payments, just going in that one direction. Is that clear to everyone so far? Good. So we call this replace by incentive. So in this channel, Bob has the incentive to sign and broadcast a transaction that pays him the most coins. And remember, it requires both parties to sign it to redeem the coins. So Alice has already signed it, given it to Bob, and then Bob will make that decision. And the key point here is that the channel state is the balance of both parties. It's basically Bob will get this and Alice will get that. That's what we're signing every time. Now over time, this is 2013 we're talking about. So we had 2014 with Christian Decker's duplex micropayment channels, and he proposed a bi-directional payment channel. So Alice can pay Bob and Bob can pay Alice. To get this to work, we have to reduce that expiry time. So every time we change direction, the channel will expire a little sooner. So that guarantees that, if Alice sends coins to Bob, then we reduce the expiry time and Bob can start sending coins to Alice. Then once we get to that expiry time, this payment's valid before any of the previous ones. So pretty much the time lock or the expiry times used, they guarantee that when we change direction, only these transactions will be valid before any previous transaction. Now don't worry about it if that's a bit confusing, because then we'll get the replaced by revocation by lightning. And this is even more confusing. Okay, so this is actually quite a simple concept. What happens is that each party has a copy of the channel state. This is Alice and Bob's balance, and they both have the same copy. Okay? So when we do a payment, we create 2 new transactions. Or, we create the new state. That'll say the new balance of both parties. Alice and Bob have to sign each other's copy of the new state. So Alice has a signature from Bob, and Bob has a signature from Alice. They both agree to the new state. And then they will exchange a secret that will invalidate the previous state. So we have one state that basically says, this is the current balance of both parties. If this is broadcast to the network, both parties can claim their coins. And all the previous states have been invalidated. So if they were broadcast, it's easy to prove that this was indeed invalidated. That's the basic idea behind Lightning. But what you notice is that, and what's really cool about Lightning is that there's no expiry time anymore. This channel could remain open forever, and it also supports bi-directional payments. But what you realize in Bitcoin is that, they support bi-directional payments, and then to remove the expiry time, these channels start getting more complicated. They don't become straightforward to explain anymore, and there's a lot going on under the hood in the protocol. And what's even worse is that trying to get more than 2 parties for a Lightning channel, or replaced by revocation, is very hard to do. It just gets to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore. And the state is restricted to the balance of both parties. We can only do payments. We can't do anything else inside a channel. So one research question is, if you were going to use something other than Bitcoin, something where you have a more expressive scripting language, could we do more than just this? Or could we simplify the idea of a channel? My disclaimer is that Bitcoin was never designed for this. The Bitcoin scripting language and the UTXO model, etc., they were never really designed for channels. They were designed for financial transactions. So when you move on to somewhere else where maybe it's a bit easier to design this, does it get easier? Does it become more practical to build, I guess? And the question is, if if you're going to be Ethereum centric, can Ethereum come to the rescue a bit? Can we make this easier to do if you have a more expressive scripting language? So in terms of payment channels, these are the Bitcoin ones. Then you have Raiden. So Raiden's sort of two Spielman channels. There's one going from Alice to Bob, and there's one going from Bob to Alice. They've basically copied the Bitcoin way, but they've changed it a bit to make it work for Ethereum. And it's really nice, actually. It's a cute protocol. But still, it only supports payments. So the next question is, can we do arbitrary applications? Can we do gaming, like Concedo games? Can we do voting? Can we do auctions? So we proposed sprites back in early 2017. Perun was roughly the same time, and we have a similar way to do it. Counterfactual are working on this, and they've got some channel construction. And what I'm working on today, that will hopefully be out in a month's time, and the code's already online, is can we combine all of this? Can we take the best bit of every channel construction and use that to build a state channel for any arbitrary application? I'm going to talk about this today, what's under construction. So what I'm working on is an empirical evaluation of state channels as a scaling solution for cryptocurrencies. So can we build state channels? How hard are they to build? What applications make sense inside a state channel? And what are the inherent weaknesses? Awesome. And I should also mention, I think the Ethereum Foundation recently funded several projects up to the cost of $2 million. So people are really interested in this scaling approach. And I'm going to build Battleship. I've spoken about it a few times now. So who's not familiar with Battleship here? You guys aren't familiar with Battleship? No childhood. I'm only joking. Battleship's really easy. We place our ships on the board, you do the same. So obviously I can't see your board, and I take random shots. If I hit your ship, it's going to be red. And you have to tell me that I've hit your ship. If I hit your ship, I get a second go. If I hit every slot on your ship, like here, 1, 2, 3, you have to declare the ship was sunk. And if I sink all your ships, then I win the game. It's a really, really fun game. It's also a really good example for state channels of all the inherent weaknesses. So I've already explained to you guys, what a smart contract is. It's a trusted third party with public state. So I'll not go back into that. So basically we have two smart contracts. What we're going to have is the application contract, which is the Battleship game itself. The idea is that you should design this Battleship contract as you normally would on the blockchain. So I could deploy this Battleship game and just play it as normal on the blockchain as you would design any other contract. And ideally, you would add two new functions. One would be the lock function. So if both players agree, we will disable all of the functionality inside this game. So the on-chain smart contract will be disabled. So you can no longer play Battleship on Ethereum. And then it will launch the state channel. So we'll create a second contract that's just responsible for the state channel itself. And now once it's locked, we can play Battleship off-chain. Maybe Alice and Bob, they start playing Battleship locally amongst each other. And they don't talk to Ethereum at all. And then eventually, we want to unlock the game. We supply the entire Battleship game, the current state of the game, to the contract. We prove this is the final state. It will unlock the game. It will unlock the contract on the blockchain. Then we can just again play Battleship via the blockchain as normal. So we can lock it up, and then we can unlock it for the application. So now we have a new life cycle with really bad animation. So pretty much, everyone will sign this lock message. Okay? And we send this to the application contract. With really cool animation, then it gets locked up. Okay? So now, when this is locked, it will create the state channel contract. So who played RuneScape here, by the way? Oh, 1, 2, thank God. Every time I give this talk, no one's heard of RuneScape. 3 people here. So that's the wizard hat from RuneScape. You normally pick that up in one of the areas. Anyway, so that's our state channel contract, is a RuneScape wizard. And next, once the application's locked up, how do we play Battleship off-chain between the two parties? So here's a high-level overview. So don't worry about this too much. Pretty much Alice is going to propose a command. Okay, so Alice is turning the Battleship game. Her command is I want to attack cell A1. So he's proposed this command. Now both parties will execute it, and the new state of the game will be that Alice has shot, cell A1. And then both parties have to agree to this, so they execute it, and then they agree. Both parties will sign the new state and exchange signatures. And then we move on, and then we propose the command again. So that's a wall of text, and I don't like text. I've got pretty animation. So this is the current state of the game. It's Alice's turn to take a shot at Bob's ship. And the current state is 0. So every state is associated with a counter. So the first state is 0. And the current state is that it's Alice's turn in the game. Alice's, she takes a shot. And if you squint hard enough, it looks like this. Or at least in my mind it does when I play Battleship. It's like playing Real Alert. Anyway, so she takes this shot. And now her shot is locked in. The new state of the game is that it's Bob's turn in the game. He has to open the cell. So both parties agree to this, and they sign it and they exchange signatures. So now this is fully signed, they've exchanged signatures, and this is the latest state. And the counter has been incremented to 1. And that's really important. So the state channel contract will consider the final state is the state with the has counter. So that's how we do the state replacement. Every time we agree a new state, we just increment the counter. Whatever state has the has counter is the final state. That's replaced by counter, which is really simple to understand. It's good for developers. Anyway, it's Bob's turn, okay? So Bob will open the attack cell. And it's a bit like, this box. Did Alice hit the ship? Did she hit water? And yep, she sunk the ship. So Bob has to declare that, yep, you sank my battleship, you hit the final cell, and now it's sunk. I stole this from Google, by the way. I don't know what ship this is. Anyway. So the outcome is Alice has hit Bob's final battleship, and that's the final piece on his board. Now we have the new state, state 2. Both parties sign it, and Alice has won the game. And that's basically how state channel works. They just keep doing this locally off-chain. And what I didn't mention is that when they actually sign the state, they don't sign the state itself. They sign the hash of the state. So you get the state, you hash it, and maybe with some random nouns you hash it, and then you sign that. So that's really nice. But that's not really important for learning how a state channel works.
What do you mean by independent channel?
So the idea is that what's really cool about this approach is that the state channel contract doesn't care what the application is. So we can have one smart contract for any state, for any application you build. Because all the state channel cares about is who are the parties, the signatures, and the hashes. So that's a really nice design, actually. So now you don't actually have to build a state channel contract. You just modify your application to fit that. And it's very minimal modification so far. Anyway, so the question is, what if Alice is about to beat Bob, and Bob doesn't cooperate? Why would he let Alice beat him at Battleship and win the bet? Now we can self-enforce it via the dispute process. Alice will always be guaranteed to win the game. Okay? And the dispute process is really simple. So inside the state channel contract, Alice can initiate a dispute. She'll send a transaction to the state channel contract and say, contract, Bob isn't working with me. He's not cooperating. So screw it. I want to turn off the channel, and I want to finish the game on the blockchain. Now the contract will set a fixed time period for both parties to submit a state. Some state of the game. Now you can imagine, maybe Bob wants to cheat. Bob could submit an earlier state of the game. He says, Alice and Bob have signed this. This is the hash of the state, and the counter's I. It's some older counter. Alice is given a time period to respond. And Alice can look at this and say, no, Bob's trying to cheat. That isn't the final state of the game. So she broadcasts both signatures, the hash of the state, and a larger counter, which both parties have signed. So the contract can use the counter to guarantee that this is a more recent state of the game than the previous one. And finally, after this fixed time period, any party can poke the contract and just resolve the dispute. And by resolve, that pretty much says that the state channel contract will consider this as the final state and as the largest counter. It will no longer accept any other state. This is the final one. So now we've disputed. And now we've agreed what was the final state of the game. Now Bob can come along, or Alice can come along, and now they can unlock the application on the blockchain. Yep.
Any party can resolve the dispute, but I guess to resolve the dispute, you would have both parties to have publish the state.
Only one. Actually, so there's two cases. I mean,
Because
three
Bob
cases.
can publish its state and then resolve the dispute as well.
So there's a fixed time period.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, they have to wait, maybe 5 hours before they can resolve it.
Okay.
But there's actually another case. So what if no one responds? We
Yeah.
trigger a dispute, no one responds. Basically, we just use the state on the blockchain already. So if you set up the channel, there's no activity. We can just use the state that was already on the blockchain. So that's in the unlock process. So yeah, the unlock, Bob will give the application the entire state of the battleship game. And whatever random nonce, but that's not really important. The application will then talk to the state channel contract and say, what was the final state hash that was agreed? The state channel dispute has been resolved. Sorry, the dispute has been resolved. What was the final hash that you got? The state channel will reply with the hash of the state. Okay? Now the application can just hash the entire state of the game and compare it with the hash it got from the state channel. If they both match, then the application can say, yep, this was the final state of the battleship game. It will store it, re-enable all the functionality, and then you can just play battleship via this contract. So that's really nice.
What's how?
Oh, what?
How? What's how?
Ours is like a random nonce. So normally when you
it's,
hash something, yeah, it's just the blind, the pre-image. But I don't think you really need it, I guess. I mean, I'd probably keep it there anyway. I just do it by default. Anyway, so basically, once this is finished, we update the contract, we re-enable everything, and now we can play the game. So the question is, this is really cool. Okay, what's really cool about a state channel is that we can play battleship and not pay any transaction fee. We just play this locally amongst ourselves thousands or hundreds of times. Maybe tens of times. I mean, I don't think you can play battleship hundreds without going crazy. But what are the new security requirements? I mean, this doesn't come for free. What could happen is an execution fork. So what happens, so battleship's probably not a good example to use in terms of just explaining the idea simply. So let's consider payments. There's Alice and Bob, and they have this payment channel, okay? Now Alice would pay Bob 1,000 Bitcoin. Today Bitcoin's maybe worth $6,000 each, so he gets about like 600,000 or 6 million. So Bob's really rich. Bob's really excited. He just got 1,000 coins in this channel. So Bob goes offline. He goes to the Lambo dealer, and he proves to his Lambo dealer that he got 1,000 coins in the channel. And the Lambo dealer's a bit of an idiot, so he accepts it. They sign the deal, and he gets a Lambo. So he's really excited now. Then, while Bob is doing this, Alice decides to close the channel. But she closes it on an earlier state that will reverse the 1,000 coin payment. Now Bob's offline, so Bob can't respond to this. The dispute period finishes, and Alice withdraws her 1,000 coins from the channel. And then Bob comes back really excited about his Lambo, and then he realizes the payment has been reversed. So now he has a Lambo, but he's bankrupt because he can't afford to pay for the Lambo. So we call this an execution fork, because on the blockchain, the execution itself has been forked. So off-chain they agreed, Bob had 1,000 coins, but what Alice does is he goes to an earlier state and says, nope, I'm not going to send him 1,000 coins. I'm just going to take it out of the contract. I'm going to send myself the 1,000 coins. So they forked the execution. So we call this the always online assumption. You don't necessarily have to be always online, but you have to be on periodically, in the sense that you have to be online to detect. So you have to be fully synchronized with the network to look out and defend against execution forks. The way you defend against it is that Alice initiates the dispute, so he tries to cheat with an older state. Bob has to come along and send the later state. If he does this, then he's protected himself and you can cancel the execution fork. You know, you can make sure it finishes on the correct state. Yep.
So you'd be in real danger if you were in a place with limited network.
No, yeah, of course, yeah.
Or if someone took down your networks, they could just...
Yeah,
They
and you
can
get
replay.
DDoSed.
You go to New Zealand for 12 hours.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is like, you know, one big problem with channels. So the question is, can we alleviate this new security requirement? So what I was working on last year was something called PISA. And there's a moon there because we're going to the moon. You know, so I don't think I have time to present PISA in detail. What time is it? Do you guys know the time?
20 past 12.
20 past. I'll skip over PISA for now, and if there's time, I'll present it afterwards.
Present it and we can win today.
A what?
Present it and we can win.
What, for the moon? Oh, and then you can, yeah. Yeah, let me just skip to the main part. So, okay, so there's two protocols for Bitcoin. There's Monitor by Taj, and this was from Scaling Bitcoin 2016. So Taj was one of the inventors of the Lightning Network. So Taj is awesome. But for Taj, what he was really focusing on was state privacy. Oh, I didn't actually highlight what they're doing. So the whole point here is that if I'm going to go offline, can I hire a third party? You know, can I give the state to someone else? And then they could defend it on my behalf. And if they do that, they get rewarded for doing this. Maybe if they resolve the dispute, they get paid for doing that. So Taj focused on state privacy. So if I hire this third party should not be able to see what my channel is about, unless there's a dispute. So in Taj's case, every time we do a payment in the channel, I can encrypt it and just give this encrypted blob to the monitor. So the monitor gets its encrypted blob, and only if there's a dispute, the monitor can then decrypt it, because when Alice tries to cheat, so he'll accidentally leak the decryption key. The monitor can get the decryption key, you know, decrypt it, and then resolve the dispute. And if he does that, he'll get rewarded some coins. So the problem of his protocol was that this encrypted blob isn't verifiable. I can just give the monitor an encrypted blob, and it has nothing to do with the state. I can just give him an encrypted blob of the word LOL, and he has to store that. Another problem is that the monitor has to do order and storage. So for every single payment in this payment channel between the two parties, I had to give the monitor a new encrypted blob. So, you know, I think in his presentation he said for 10,000 channels that might have 100,000 payments between them for every channel, there's like 1 terabyte worth of storage for the monitor. And actually that doesn't scale. You know, that's not great. The reward policy is that the monitor only gets paid if there's a dispute. But what if there's no disputes? This dude's storing 1 terabyte and there's no disputes. So he doesn't get paid for doing this. And there's no accountability. If you hire the monitor, there's no evidence that you've hired him. So if he just goes offline and you lose and you get cheated, there's no recourse. There's no way to publicly embarrass him for doing that. So then there's another protocol by Rosabeef called Watchtower. So this is much better. So there's state privacy in the sense that I give a hash to the Watchtower and a signature from every party. So now it's verifiable. This Watchtower can verify that this is a real job. There's also order 1 storage. So the Watchtower only has to store the latest job that I gave him. But the caveat is that in Bitcoin, we only get these 2 nice properties if there's a new consensus rule. And when you look at the details, this new consensus rule is very similar to the replaced by counter that I presented earlier. You know, there's a hash of the state, there's a counter, and a signature from every party. So we need a new consensus rule for this to work. But he also proposed, if I do hire this Watchtower, I can pay him via the Lightning Network. So, you know, every time I hire him, I give him a micro payment. So that's really nice. This guy's now getting paid in real time for every job he accepts. But there's still no accountability. If I hire the Watchtower, there's no evidence that I've hired him. You know, so if he does cheat me, I still, you know, I have no evidence to say that he cheated me. So that was sort of the state of the art, I guess. So I watched this presentation at BPace. It was at lightning speed. I don't know if who's heard of Rosabeef, by the way? Oh, I can't pronounce his real name. I really need to practice. But anyway, so he's awesome. But he also speaks at lightning speed. So, I had to turn his, when I rewatched it, I had to turn it down to minus 2.5 the speed. And he's also building the Lightning Network, so it's ironic. No, but he's awesome. So this is definitely very good progress for doing this. And this is sort of like a comparable chart. They're both privacy preserving, there's verifiable, better storage. I'll explain these two in a second, but it's still not deployable today because we need this new fork. I mean, it could be a soft fork or whatever, but we still need this new consensus rule. But then what I came up with was PISA. So this is more for a state channel. So those two previous cases are just for Bitcoin and just for payments. So I've been working on state channels for a year, I guess. And then I thought, well, could I hire a third party to watch a state channel on our behalf? But when I looked at the other two proposals, I mean, I guess me and Rosabee, we independently came up with this part. One sec. We both independently came up with that part. Collectively signing a hash. So I remember I was working on it. I was discussing my co-authors. Then I seen his proposal. I'm like, oh, he's basically doing the same thing. So that's really cool. We sort of came up with the same idea there. And then what I decided was, one of the big problem in all these schemes is that there's no accountability. So if you hire this tower, I have no evidence that I've hired him. So what we proposed was a fair exchange protocol. So when I pay the tower, I get a signed receipt in return. And I can use this signed receipt as cryptographic evidence that I've hired the guy, or I've hired the tower, and I've hired him for a particular job. So if he doesn't do it, I now have evidence that he hasn't done it. But what we also proposed was recourse. So if the tower does cheat, I hire him, I go offline, he colludes, and I lose out. I now have evidence of the dispute on the blockchain, and I have this cryptographic receipt. So now I can use both pieces of evidence to penalize the tower. So then he will lose a security deposit for cheating. So that's the main idea. I don't think I have enough time to go through it. I can quickly go through it. There's a new custodian contract, new tower contract, and this stores a large security deposit. Okay? And then when we hire the custodian, Bob sends a signature from every party and the hash of the state and a counter. I've missed out the counter. And now we have this fair exchange protocol, which is really nice. And for simplicity, they can be paid over the Lightning Network or via one-way payment channel. That thing I presented at the very start, the Spielman channel. And we make some assumptions for this slide. We assume the watchtower, the custodian, he can see the contract on chain. He knows what state channel he's going to watch out for. And the appointment information is pre-agreed. The payment and the period of time he's going to watch it for. So pretty much when I hire the custodian or the tower, what I do is that I say, here's a new appointment. I want you to accept this job. The tower will reply. He'll do some sanity checks. He'll make sure there's a valid job. It will actually resolve the dispute, etc. He'll do some sanity checks. Afterwards, he'll send a signed receipt. Here's the appointment information, but the main part is that he'll have a hash. The tower creates this random number, he hashes it, and he includes the hash inside the receipt. So we call this the receipt hash. And he also signs this as well. So now the customer has a signed receipt from the custodian for this job. But it's not valid yet. It can't be used just yet. It needs to be ratified. So what the customer does is that he sets up a conditional transfer. And I didn't present this earlier, but what you can do is say the following. The customer says, tower, if you reveal that secret, the preimage of this hash, if you reveal me the secret, you can claim these coins. But you have to do this within an expiry time. So now there's a conditional transfer. The customer sets this up with the tower, and then when the tower reveals the secret to the customer, this payment is then confirmed. Is everyone with me so far? Awesome, because I know you're studying it.
Sorry?
Brain's leaking out if you're looking at me.
Anyway, so the point here is that Bob can say, tower, if you reveal this secret, you get these coins. If the tower reveals the secret, Bob now has the secret and the receipt. Now we consider this ratified, because this is proof that the tower revealed the secret, so that means he must have got paid. And then by revealing the secret, the tower's guaranteed this payment. If Bob doesn't cooperate, the tower can send this conditional transfer to the blockchain. You can also send the secret, and the blockchain will say, okay, there was this condition, you satisfied it, you get the coins. So that's really nice. It's just a fair exchange protocol. And then he reveals it, this receipt is now ratified. Awesome. So now the question is, what if Alice and the custodian collude to cheat Bob? Okay? Bob's evil, has these really bad horns. So he triggers a dispute as he broadcasts an older state. Now there's a period, you know. Pretty much the custodian could respond and resolve the dispute, but he doesn't. The custodian never responds, Alice resolves it, and it's based on an older state. Now what happens is that Bob comes online, he's like, oh no, the custodian cheated me and I've lost all of my coins. What can the customer do about this? So the customer has cryptographic evidence of wrongdoing, okay? So what the customer can do is talk to the custodian contract. So this is the tower's contract with the very large security deposit. What Bob sends is a signed and ratified receipt. So he gives the signed receipt and that secret. You know, that was part of that conditional transfer. So this is proof the custodian has been paid and has accepted the job. Now the custodian contract says, okay, I have evidence that, you know, the tower accepted the job. Did he resolve the dispute? Or was there even any dispute for him to resolve? This contract can talk to the state channel contract. And the state channel contract is responsible for storing disputes. You know, like a record of the dispute. So this contract will say, state channel, was there a dispute the tower could have resolved? And the state channel replies saying, yes, there was. According to the receipt, the tower could have resolved the dispute that was triggered. So the custodian now has evidence that there was a dispute, the tower accepted the job, and he says, okay, he cheated, I'm going to freeze that very large security deposit. And that means the tower has now been penalized for cheating. So what's cool, I mean, the baby doesn't get his money back. You know, Bob doesn't get refunded for this. But he gets recourse. He can get some revenge if the custodian cheats. So now there's a financial deterrent for the tower not to cheat. The tower will only cheat if the amount of money he's going to make is more than the penalty. So, I mean, it's not a guarantee. He might still cheat if it's worth his time. But it just increases, you know, the risk of, or the cost for him to cheat. Anyway, so that's basically how the tower works in a very short nutshell. So what's really nice is that there's a reason why I have the Bitcoin and the Ethereum symbol. So state privacy, it sort of works in Bitcoin. Watchtower showed us that it can work, but it isn't there yet. The fair exchange protocol for the receipt, that works on Bitcoin today. So Watchtower, if it's ever built, can have some accountability. We can get a signed receipt that he was hired, so we can embarrass or ruin the reputation of the Watchtower. We get order 1 storage if there's that new fork, but we don't get financial recourse in Bitcoin. We can't have that working in Bitcoin today. I don't know how they get it to work in Bitcoin yet. But anyway, that's our comparison chart. You know, obviously I made the protocol, so everything's green. It's a bit biased. That's also because that's the only columns I could think about. But basically the point here is that while I designed this for Ethereum, what's really nice is going back, looking at my old love of Bitcoin and saying, what works in Bitcoin and what doesn't work in Bitcoin. And this part works. So we also improved the Watchtower protocol, which is awesome. None of these final 2 parts work on Ethereum. So it's beneficial to everyone. So while we do research on Ethereum, or whatever, while we do work on Ethereum, it can also be very beneficial to Bitcoin. And the summary of PISA is that, you know, for the state channel stuff, we have safety, we have liveness, and now we have an accountable third party. And I only have 4 more slides before I finish, because I know everyone's quite tired. So now this is the under construction bit. Empirical evaluation thoughts. So now we're going back to Battleship. Okay? So, as you brought up earlier, state channel independence. If we're going to build Battleship, or auctions, or voting, or anything else, the state channel is completely independent. It only deals with signatures and hashes. It doesn't care what the application is. And that's really nice from a design point. it's completely modular, or it's a modular design. You know, in the ideal case, if you were to use a state channel or a payment channel, there's no latency in the sense that this channel is as fast as how fast the clients can sign the message. If your party cooperates really well, we could play poker very fast or auctions very fast. We don't have to worry about the blockchain latency anymore. There's no transaction fee to play anything within the state channel. And there's only about 2 transactions. You know, you turn on the channel and you turn it off. For bottle shit, oh yep, go ahead.
There's no fee in using the channel. Like there's no, let's say, a business use case where I just run state channels for people and they pay me to use the channel or something like that.
So yeah, so I can allude to that. So what you can have is a network. So right now I'm only considering a single channel.
Yeah.
But what you can have is a network of channels. So let's just say you have Alice, Bob, Caroline, and Dave, and Alice wants to pay Dave, but they don't have a channel. Alice could pay Bob, Bob can pay Caroline, and Caroline can pay Dave. So we can do a route for the payment. We can actually do this in a way where we don't have to trust each other as well. But Bob and Caroline will only do this if they get a small fee.
Yeah.
So in that case, it would be some form of a payment. But for normal, like, you know, single channel, we don't care about a network, there's no fee to play bottle ship. So that's nice. And you could do 200 transactions off chain and not pay for any of them. Yep.
Who's adding the numbers? Who's running Geth? I don't understand that bit.
For the state channel,
Yeah.
the 2 parties.
Okay.
So there's no blockchain anymore. They run this locally, they don't need a blockchain for that. They just run the game, authorize the new state, run the game,
Okay.
authorize the new state.
Understood.
Awesome. So I mean, I think in our experiment we're using Geth between both parties locally just to make it easy. But in the worst case, what happens if we turn on the channel, we set up the game, but then Bob doesn't cooperate? We have to turn off the channel. And now both parties are committed to playing the entire bottle ship game via the blockchain. So that's 200 transactions in the worst case, and you have to pay a fee for every move. So in this case, that's really expensive. You know, you have this expectation to play it in the channel, but now you're forced to finish the game on the blockchain. So actually, for something like bottle ship, state channels might not make sense, because that's a really bad worst case to have, because that wasn't your expectation. If there's only 1 or 2 moves, that's tolerable. And why is this worst case really bad? You know, transaction fee for every move, there's lag. Like, did you guys play video games in the dial-up era? You know, you're playing like Team Fortress and the dude just jumps across the screen. I wasn't doing that for bottle ship, but it's even worse. It's now like 5 or 10 minutes every move. This game can last all day. And actually sending the entire full state can be quite expensive. So if you're not careful how you design this game, the 10 by 10 grid, that could be 2 million gas. You know, that's very expensive just to send to the blockchain. Of course, we got rid of the board. We managed to work out how you don't need the board for the game anymore. They make it a bit cheaper. But that takes a lot of work. I mean, you can no longer design bottle ship in a straightforward manner if you want to reduce the full state. And now we have the funfair dilemma, and I really like this. So at that Berlin workshop I spoke about, there was the counterfactual guys, L4, and they have like a lot of funding to build state channels. Their goal is let's minimize what's stored in the blockchain. We can just store multi-sig, you know, 2 signatures, and that's it. And the entire state channel could be off-chain. We could have a Go game, we could have bottle ship, we could have a payment channel, we got multiple apps, all off-chain. We're just playing back and forth in the state channel. So that's really cool. But then the funfair guys stood up and they sort of started arguing with L4 or counterfactual. They said that's not a good idea. Because what if there's a dispute? You know, what if one person doesn't cooperate? Then you have to send the entire application, which is the state and the code, to the blockchain all at once. And that may be quite expensive to do. You know, that causes like, so to sum this up, I mean, what if you're playing bottle ship and you have a $10 bet, but it causes $100 to resolve a dispute. You know, it causes $100 to put the game on the blockchain and to finish the game. You're not going to do that for a $10 bet. So actually state channels and off-chain protocols add in this new, you know, crypto economic attack vector. you now have to consider the dispute process when you're designing your application. If it's too expensive, people could, use that to their advantage. And I guess the main summary is that, 2 years later, we're on the verge of practical and deployable state channels. So in Bitcoin, we have the Lightning Network now. That is being built, and they're really going for it. I think they're awesome. But in the Ethereum world, for a long time we were trying to design how to build a state channel. They don't exist really yet. Some people have some implementations, but they're quite bespoke. Really what you want is this state channel that could be used for anything. And now we're getting to the point where magic unicorns no longer apply, or need not apply. We don't need a magic unicorn for a state channel. At some point they will exist and will be getting used on the network. This is, I guess, a case of engineering now, and not really protocol design. I think that's my last slide. So yeah, that's it for the bonus content. I'm sure everyone's really tired. Is there any questions you guys have? Have I worn everyone out? Yeah, it could be about anything, not just this. Anything you had during the past 2 days. Or we can eat lunch. I think it's arrived. Okay.
Shall we eat lunch? Good idea.
Let's eat lunch.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We can always do a Q&A again at the end of the
Yeah.
It's all cool.